there are four names that 10 years ago did not exist together. Today, they are stitched into the biggest stages on Earth: Coachella, Wembley, the Grammys' red carpet, the cover of Time magazine. Jisoo, Jennie, Rosé, Lisa. This is the story of how four girls from four different worlds became one group that rewrote what a K-pop girl group was allowed to be. This is the story of Blackpink. Before the lights, before the name, there were just four trainees walking through the halls of YG Entertainment in Seoul, and almost none of them were from the same place. Jennie Kim joined as a trainee in 2010, after years spent partly in New Zealand, fluent in English before she ever performed in Korean. That same year in Bangkok, a teenager named Lalisa Manobel, known to the world today as Lisa, stood out among 4,000 hopefuls at a YG audition. She was the only one chosen. She became the company's first international trainee, leaving her home country alone at 14 to chase a dream in a language she didn't yet speak. A year later, Kim Jisoo, Jisoo, entered the building, already carrying the quiet maturity of someone who had grown up the eldest of three. And in Melbourne, Australia, a girl named Rosé Rosé was performing in church choirs before YG discovered her voice an ocean away from Seoul. She ranked first among 700 applicants in an Australian audition and packed her life into a suitcase for Korea. For years, the four of them trained separately, quietly, without knowing they would ever stand on a stage together. Long days, harsh feedback, dorm rooms instead of childhood bedrooms. It was a world built on discipline, and the four of them survived it side by side. In the summer of 2016, after years of speculation and silence from YG, the rumors finally became real. One by one, over the course of a few weeks, the company revealed its newest girl group, first Jennie, then Lisa, then Jisoo, then finally Rosé. On June 29th, the name was confirmed: Blackpink. A name built on contradiction: black for strength, edge, and depth, pink for sweetness, charm, and femininity. A label representative explained it simply: they were a group that proved beauty wasn't the whole story. On August 8, 2016, Blackpink released their debut single album, Square One, featuring two songs, Whistle and Boombaya. It was an almost unheard-of achievement for a debut. Both tracks shot to the top of the charts simultaneously. Less than 2 weeks later, they won their first music show trophy, the fastest a girl group had ever done so after debuting. The industry took notice immediately. This wasn't just another idol group. This was something built to last. What followed was a string of songs that didn't just top Korean charts. They crossed borders most K-pop acts hadn't even attempted. Playing with Fire, As If It's Your Last, Do 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 Do, a song so massive it became, at the time, the most viewed music video ever released by a Korean act, and still ranks among the most iconic comebacks in the genre's history. In 2018, Blackpink signed a global partnership with Interscope Records, giving them a foothold in the American music industry most K-pop groups before them never had. Collaborations followed with Dua Lipa, with Lady Gaga, with Selena Gomez, a sign that Blackpink wasn't trying to break into the West. The West was coming to them. Then came April 2019. Blackpink became the first Korean girl group in history to perform at Coachella, the largest music festival stage in America. To the wider world, it was a watershed moment, proof that the walls separating K-pop from the global mainstream were no longer holding. In October 2020, 4 years after debut, Blackpink released the album, their first full-length studio record. Days later, Netflix released Light Up the Sky, the group's first documentary, pulling back the curtain on the exhaustion, the loneliness, and the relentless work hidden behind the choreography. The timing carried weight. The world had gone quiet under the pandemic, concert halls sat empty, and yet Blackpink found new ways to reach their fans, including a live-stream concert that pulled in millions of viewers from their bedrooms instead of stadium seats. Even isolated, Blackpink was still finding rooms to fill. Then came the era that turned Blackpink from stars into a phenomenon. In 2022, Born Pink dropped, led by Pink Venom, and Shut Down, both record-breaking on Spotify and the Billboard charts. The album itself debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, the highest charting album ever by a female K-pop group at the time. The Born Pink World Tour that followed became the highest-grossing tour ever by a girl group, spanning continents and selling out stadiums that, just a few years earlier, would have seemed impossible for a Korean act to fill. And in April 2023, Blackpink returned to Coachella, this time as headliners, the first K-pop act ever to top that bill. A few months later, they took home the MTV Video Music Award for Group of the Year, beating out some of the biggest pop acts in the world. By the end of that year, Blackpink weren't just the most successful K-pop girl group in history. They were one of the most successful music acts on the planet, period. But success, this large, always comes with a negotiation. As 2023 came to a close, contracts were due to expire, and for months, the question hanging over Blackpink wasn't about music. It was about whether the group would even continue. In December, YG Entertainment confirmed that all 4 members had signed an extension, but only for group activities. For the first time, each member would step outside YG's management for everything else. Within days, Jennie revealed she'd quietly built her own label, Odd Atelier, months earlier. It became clear. Blackpink was staying together, but the members were no longer willing to be defined only as a group. What came next was less a hiatus than an explosion. 4 solo careers, 4 completely different identities, running at once. Jennie released Ruby, an album built entirely on her own terms through Odd Atelier, and stepped further into acting and global fashion campaigns, cementing herself less as an idol and more as what insiders now call a global pop force. Lisa pushed even further into uncharted territory, becoming the first K-pop star named to the Met Gala host committee, making her acting debut on HBO's The White Lotus, filmed in her home country of Thailand, and continuing to build a solo discography blending Thai, Spanish, and English influences. Rosé, signed to the Black label, released her solo album Rosé, and then delivered Apt, with Bruno Mars, a song that became one of the biggest global crossover hits of the decade, and turned her into a streaming juggernaut entirely outside the Blackpink name. She later signed a major partnership with Levi's, leaning fully into her own rock-influenced identity. Jisoo, working through her family's label Blissoo, released her debut single Me, expanded into acting with Netflix's Boyfriend on Demand, and quietly proved that the member once seen as the group's gentlest voice could carry a solo spotlight all her own. For a while, it looked like the group might stay permanently in the background of 4 very loud solo careers. It didn't. In 2025, Blackpink announced their first-ever all-stadium tour, eventually titled the Deadline World Tour, kicking off in July at Goyang Stadium in South Korea. Across more than a dozen stadium dates, sold-out residencies in cities like Tokyo and Hong Kong, and stages built around each member's now fully formed solo identity, Blackpink proved something rare. That 4 solo superstars could still walk back on stage and become one group again, without losing what made each of them individually unstoppable. In February 2026, they released their EP Deadline, its lead single, G.O., co-written with Coldplay's Chris Martin, broke first-day sales records and debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Global 200. The tour closed its main run on January 26, 2026, in Hong Kong, but the story wasn't finished. As 2026 unfolds, the group is preparing anniversary celebrations around August 8th, marking 10 years since 4 trainees from 4 different countries became one name. 10 years ago, Blackpink were 4 trainees who didn't speak the same first language, performing a debut nobody could have promised would work. Today, they are 4 solo forces who chose, again and again, to come back to each other. They didn't just open a door for K-pop in the West. They knocked it down, walked through it together, and then built 4 more doors behind them, one for each of their own names. Jisoo, Jennie, Rosé, Lisa. 10 years in, and the story isn't close to over.